Hey there, everyone. Welcome. Happy to be here with you today. Thanks for joining me. As I mentioned in the last video, I wanted to talk a little bit about change, transition, and transformation. For me, these three states, right, of shift allow us to kind of gauge where we're at, right? Where are we in our growth experience, in our evolution experience? What phases and stages are we operating in? And as co-creators with the divine, we get to vote on the yes, to make changes, transitions, and transformations in our life. Particularly now during this amazing process that we're in, this evolutionary jump in our spiritual maturity. And we get to choose to let go of, we could say, our small selves, our egoic selves, the behaviors, thought patterns, emotional patterns that keep us stuck and rooted in what does not work. What does not work is actually, it keeps us stuck in who we are not, who we may have believed ourselves to be based on the world in which we've been living. But now that our world is changing drastically, our realities are changing drastically, we get to be proactive. Not because we're in pain and suffering, but because we're saying yes to our spiritual growth, development, awakening, and maturation process. I'm using that word a lot more because it's a key word about how we are needing to be operating as we move more towards our divinity. Excuse me. So if this interests you, stay tuned. Thank you for subscribing. Appreciate it. Appreciate you all being here and receiving what it is that I have to share and resonating. It is what I'm here for, so super happy to have you here to receive. All right, let's start with change. Like any mapping system, right? If you've been following me for a while, sorry, I segued there really quick. If you've been watching me for a while, you know that I use mapping systems. So more so if you work with me one-on-one, we have specific mapping systems that we use to personalize your experience. But I also use nature, the seasons, the cycles of nature, the cycles of the moon, our relationship with different planets, right? And the energies and the consciousness of our celestial family. And all of these are ways that we can orient our journey and that we can deepen our relational intimacy with all of life. This is relational intimacy, and unifying all of life is a part of the divine union template. It's bringing all polarities into harmony, into unification, into a way of operating and existing within a peaceful and coherent state of being. It's not stagnant, it's not static, it fluctuates as we fluctuate. Everything is always in change, always. It's whether we're aware of it or not. It's whether we're going along with the flow or not, or resistant. And if we are, the process of change, transition, and transformation have much more ease and grace. We move through life with that fluidity. And as we move forward in our time together, there's going to be some changes, there's going to be some transition, because we are transforming from the past teachings and the past focuses into new focuses. So let's just talk about this process and how you can access this information for you, right? Because that's what this is really all about, is how can I support you along your journey where you can put things into action so that you can get the fruits of the labor. So you can recognize that, and join in this party of everything that is happening in this embodied journey of transformation. So change, part of the definition, I wrote these things down so I could have them just concise. in the dictionary, change is to alter or modify. All right, to substitute one thing for another and to replace something with something that is more new or better, and to become different. Now, change is something that is more consistent in our life. We're going to be more familiar with change and transition because they happen automatically. Now, when we're talking about changing, replacing from, something newer or better, we can do that in the physical world. We're not as interested in what's happening, changing out our material plane as much as our inner world. So when we go through a change, let's say, for instance, you leave a job. Maybe you've been a personal assistant, all right, or you have been a sales associate in some retail store. And then you shift over into a different store. You're making this linear move. There are going to be some things that are different in your position, in your responsibilities. Here you might have been familiar with everything. Maybe you've been there for years on end, and so it's become, rote for you. In other words, it's habitualized. You just know it. It's been embodied. And then you come over here and you've got this new position. A lot of it is familiar, and yet there's a learning curve to it. That learning curve invites you to change how you operate, right? For better or not necessarily, right? Just altering you in ways that your brain works differently, your perceptions change, your role is a little different, and you get to step into a new part of yourself that you didn't have to for years. So there's that little bit of things are new, things are different. And because things are new and different, you become new and different. Internally, your expression goes through an internal change. Your personality goes through an internal change. Maybe your routine, the hours that you work, goes through an internal change. You are in the process of meeting new people, new coworkers. That requires change and adjustment, and personality dynamics change. So that's change. Now, let's say we're going to stay with the same situation. Now you've got a promotion, and not only have you left your old place of employment, but now you're moving into a new company. You've got a promotion into, let's say, a managerial role. When you do this change, there's going to be all of those same things that are changing, and your levels of responsibility have greatly changed. Your invitation to step up into new ways of being accountable. Perhaps you need to begin to communicate differently. Maybe now as a manager, you have to learn, how do I responsibly, effectively, harmoniously communicate and be a manager, right? Be a leader. This is going to create more change in you, and it's going to happen over time. That time is this process that you are going through a maturation from let's just say a lesser responsible role to a more responsible role. And that means that you're going to be asked to mature in specific ways. And as you do this, it's going to be in process. There's going to be a span of time where you're going to maybe feel that learning curve. You're going to feel that edge. You're going to be feeling the change and this transition within you that life is bringing you a little bit more acutely. It's probably going to feel a little bit more challenging, right? There might be more emotions connected to it. You might have stuff come up, right? Old patterns, old belief. Am I worthy? Can I do this? Is this really right and true for me? And that is part of this transition. You're stepping into new shoes. You're stepping into a new suit, so to speak. Now, you had an old suit, now you've got a new suit. You had shoes that were feeling a little tight in your familiar place. And now they might be a little big, right? Can I step into these shoes, or can I fit into them? But then as you keep moving through this transition, as you keep allowing yourself internally to go through the transmutation of the ways you believed into the ways that you're beginning to believe, you're feeling more confident, let's say a month or two down the road, right? You're feeling more confident. You're feeling more at ease. Your relationships are starting to build within this new environment. Your relationship with other managers, or the top manager, or your regional managers, or corporate, all of that is beginning to fit. And then before you know it, you're fitting in that suit. The shoes fit good. They're not falling off. You're not tripping. And you've made it through this transition of deep change. Now, we go through this all the time, right? Life in and of itself has built into it stages and phases of our natural transitions. All cultures have this built in. And we experience this when we're moving from, grade school into middle school, into high school, into college. Every one of these leaps is this new transition, whereas maybe from grade to grade is more just change, particularly if you've been with the same, you've been with your same community. We go through this whenever we go off into the workforce from college, right? There are these transitions in time where we are organically changed, and we don't always pay attention. We're not always conscious of these changes. The more conscious that we can be of these changes, the more embodied we become. the more connected and integrated we are, meaning our level of wholeness and wisdom and depth of our connection to self solidifies, fortifies, and those things that don't work, the old beliefs, the insecurities, those type of things, we let them dissipate and we recognize, oh, I've moved from fear and insecurity into confidence and faith. And then that becomes our new foundation. And I'm not saying that this does not happen organically, but oftentimes what can happen is we're just going along for the ride and we never really, send out the old. Like, send them out, let them go. They're no longer pertinent. They're no longer resonant. And we let that part of us fade away. And we completely embody the new reality, the new self, the new truths, the maturation process. So that's change and transition. Now I want to talk about transformation. This is less familiar. This is less embarked upon, because what tends to happen is we become comfortable in our day-to-day lives and we become comfortable in change and transition. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. And if we haven't been through a lot of change and transition, we may not have established the resiliency that requires, right? And so that's kind of a different topic, but mostly we're able to move through more of these linear landscapes where things are pretty much still the same. Yeah, I changed this, because life invites me to, life forces me to. Where we're at now as co-creators, we aren't relying on negative motivation to help us to change. We bring our intention and an enthusiasm and curiosity into next leveling. I'm going to make another video about next leveling, because I'm defining these concepts that I work with more succinctly, because we're going to be building on them as we move forward. And as I move into my Patreon page, we're going to be working with these hands-on for those who feel called. Now, transformation. I'll read what it says here. Excuse me. It is a thorough or dramatic change in form and state of being. It is the process of metamorphosis. It is moving from the caterpillar into the butterfly. It is a complete overhaul of the humanness that we have known ourselves to be into the divine human, the new human. And that requires deep and profound willingness to expand our change and transformation into more unfamiliar territory. Not unfamiliar territory that is going to, bring about trauma or drama, but it is unfamiliar territory that is going to stretch in healthy ways our connection to the divine, our levels of faith and trust, our knowing innately that we are more than just a mere human, that we are humans that are also carrying the coding and the energetics of our angelic selves, our galactic selves, our star being selves. Many of you are already familiar with this, but we're starting to get down to the reality of this, not just the consciousness of it, not just the intellectual knowing of this, but to shift our consciousness to know this, to become this. And that takes profound transformation. So Pam Gregory, if you have not, I've talked about her before, and if you haven't checked in with her, I highly recommend that you look into her video that was probably 2 months ago or so, that is on imaginal cells. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. I don't have all the details. I don't have the science down pat, but I highly recommend. It's fascinating. So within the caterpillar, there is coded in the DNA what is called imaginal cells. Those are the cells that are the butterfly. Okay, so within the caterpillar, when the time is right, as dictated by nature, as dictated by, life, capital L, that is a part of divine order. These imaginal cells begin to activate from the DNA. And the caterpillar, now I don't remember whether the caterpillar has already built the chrysalis, or if this is the impetus to build the chrysalis, right? To go into its pod. And at first, the caterpillar tries to destroy these imaginal cells. It tries to destroy itself because it doesn't understand. It doesn't know that these are the seeds of its transformation. And so it goes through this process, right? But the imaginal cells, because this is evolution, the imaginal cells are more powerful than the caterpillar's ability to destroy them. Whether that's trying to eat them, whatever it is, the deep resistance, right? The caterpillar has a deep resistance to its death from being a caterpillar. But at whatever point these imaginal cells take over this evolutionary process, and the caterpillar has less of its caterpillar and more of its butterfly. And so begins this process of transformation. The dragonfly also goes through a similar quickened evolutionary process, right? Where it transforms rapidly from the underwater kind of, critter. And then evolution, life says it's time for you to evolve. And then it goes through this crazy metamorphic, beautiful change, right? So what we're looking at here is not that different to humanity. Our quote-unquote junk DNA, we could say, is our imaginal cells. We are transforming. There is no stopping it. The evolution is stronger than human will. And part of the evolution of the human is to allow the disillusion, the breakdown, just like that caterpillar. Like if you've ever heard or watched what happens, it's intense, right? The caterpillar literally is broken down so that the butterfly emerges, so that it transforms from one state of being into another. And we can, anthropomorphize this whole process. That means like putting human emotions and everything on the caterpillar, whether they're accurate or not. That there's fear, right? That there's pain, that there's great suffering, as it has to release all of these things that it thought it was. Does a caterpillar go through all of that? Probably not, because it doesn't have that level of consciousness, or its technology, right, is not really built for that. But as human beings, we have all of these awarenesses, and we have free will to either say yes or try to resist. And if we try to resist, the process becomes more painful. Our suffering is extended in a longer time, so we end up in transition, right? Transitions and transitions and transitions that are built on change having to happen, because it is the nature of this life right now that we're living. It is where we're at as a human species, not just human species, all of species. Our entire galaxy is going through this right now. Transformation within the ascension process, the ascension, the awakening, our spiritual evolution, whatever we want to call all of this is up to us. But it is happening, and we're all feeling it. When we say yes, we move through these phases so much faster. We recognize, wow, we are truly deeply resilient. We can look at things that we don't want to see. We can let go. We can grieve. And we're fortified by that inner strength from our connection to the divine, to die in the old ways. Let them go so that we can rebirth as a butterfly. So, I have a dragonfly tattoo because it's my totem, because my blueprint, and I have dragonfly earrings today because we were going to be talking about this. Because my blueprint, my divine, technology is one of quickened transformation. This is how I live. This is how I rock. This is how I roll. That's why, this is what I do. To support people, to help guide, to help shed an embodied perspective on all the perspectives that are valid. This is just my prism to journey with you, right? To guide those who feel called along the way, and to break down these phases and stages and processes that we go through so that they feel less daunting, right? So that you don't feel as alone, that you feel like, oh, this is what's happening. Because when we don't know, it gets very confusing, right? It can be overwhelming. It can be scary. So when we're working consciously along this path, everybody's blueprint is going to be specific to you. The important thing is to understand your blueprint, and I'm going to do a class on this. The more you understand your blueprint, you begin to understand how it is that you're meant to travel. The information is inside of you. You cannot find your blueprint outside of you. It is inside of you, but you have to be willing. Well, it's inside. It's in your energy field. It's in your etheric. It's connected to your higher selves. But you have to be willing to say yes. We have to be willing to let go of the old lives. And that's going to be different for everybody. The pace of that, how that looks, what that means. You know, if you're a single person, that's going to be very different than if you have a family. Your blueprint is going to regulate your growth process. But what we are all doing, regardless of our pace, is we are evolving into higher beings. Because we've always been higher stated beings. But part of what we've done through a myriad of influences and choices is we have forgotten. And this planet, from one perspective, which, you know, I feel like resonates, is this is an intense school. This is a school of learning forgetfulness, learning about pain and suffering, and learning that you can grow out of pain and suffering into our divinity, into our wholeness, into harmony and joy and love. But you have to go along becoming again and again, right? That caterpillar. And over time, we learn that we don't have to try to destroy these beautiful, powerful, imaginal selves. We surrender to them and we let ourselves become mush and we let ourselves break down, and then we allow this next incarnation to birth. And that is transformation. So here's the invitation. I always like to extend the invitations at the end. What changes? If you begin to look at where have your last most profound, changes been? Where have those changes kept you in longer periods of transition because you've up-leveled yourself? And when was your last big transformation where, like in the tarot deck, you lived a tower moment or many tower moments where you were in a dark night of the soul, perhaps? And what came out of each of these? So I would invite you just to do like a quick journaling about this, because this is a know thyself exercise. This is a way that you get more clear with the story that you're living. And then that becomes more empowering and we become more embodied. All right, that's it. So thanks for being here. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for liking. Talk to you soon. We're going to talk next about next leveling.